on opening a space for prayer. We are grateful you are taking some time out of your day to spend with us. Today's webinar will be uploaded to our website later this week, so we will begin. On your screen, you should see a lovely array of faces. Our team today is Mandy Olivam, who will be our host. Mandy's on the program team here at JustFaith Ministries and is primarily responsible for the Justice Walking programs. You'll also see Corey Lockhart, who is responsible for Good News People and Just Faith Catholic. Joe Grant, who is our program director, responsible for Engaging Spirituality. And I'm Althea, and I'll be handling the technical aspect of the program. Just a reminder that our September webinar will be September 24th. It's always the last Thursday of the month at noon, and the topic will be moving from discussion to dialogue. My name is Corey, and I will be leading us in our opening prayer. This prayer is adapted from a prayer from Good News People. So as we begin, I invite you to make sure that you are seated comfortably, to close your eyes if you choose, and to breathe. May the light of God's love illuminate our hearts, guide our lives, and dispel the darkness in the world. Each one of us is created in God's image. Today, may we open our eyes to the way each of us is a reflection of the goodness of God. We are vessels of God's love, meant to be poured out for others. I invite you to look into your own heart. You are created in God's image. What is one way God's love flows through you? I invite you to open your heart to a friend or a family member. That person is created in God's image. How does he or she reflect God's love? I invite you to open your heart to a person with whom you are struggling. That person is created in God's image. How or where does God's light shine through that person? And finally, I invite you to open your heart to a situation of violence or devastation in our world. The people involved in that struggle are created in God's image. How can we open our hearts wide enough to see the good that exists in people who do evil? Loving God, you show us your love through each of us, your created beings. May we recognize you when we look into the eyes and into the lives of other people. In those places where we struggle to see you, may we open our hearts all the wider. Amen.
Thank you, Corey. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar. This is Mandy speaking. As you can hear, we're so gifted to have staff members who not only accompany us in prayer on webinars, but with whom we share prayerful space every day in our office. We begin every day with prayer as a community. So I know many of you are just beginning your program year. Some of you joining us today are veteran facilitators who've participated in many JustFaith Ministries programs, and some of you may be new facilitators, and this may be the first time you've ever embarked on a journey with JustFaith Ministries. Regardless of whether this is a familiar or a new aspect and dimension of our programs, prayer is essential. Oftentimes we hear from folks that prayer can be intimidating, especially in many of our traditions. We're offered examples of experts leading prayer, people who have years of training or who have degrees in spirituality, who are so-called qualified to facilitate prayer. But today what I hope is that we can offer a space to free you, to open up your mind and heart to the ways that prayer is actually just a letting go and being present to the divine, the Spirit who's always with us and moving as us and through us and among us, especially in a JustFaith Ministries group where a small collection of people come together to share intimate and vulnerable space, to engage in difficult questions, and to embark on a journey of transformation together. Prayer is not only the glue that can really solidify the authentic relationships formed there, but it's a space to open us to the deeper undercurrent of the Spirit moving, not only in the group members, but that's guiding us in our journey. Prayer is something that each of us has experienced, not just in the formal way, but oftentimes in the most spontaneous and unlikely places and ways. Think about the last time that you were overwhelmed with awe or wonder, when beauty or bliss overtook you. Think of a time when you were overwhelmed with sorrow, when the busyness of your days or the suffering of your heart overwhelmed you. Or perhaps a space where gratitude and connection to others helped you to enter life more fully. These are examples of prayer happening to us. Oftentimes we think of prayer as something we have to plan for, to do, or to create. But actually, prayer is just a container to become aware of the Spirit moving among us. When we can let go of our agenda and realize that God is longing to speak to us in each moment of our lives, and that it just requires a receptivity on our part to receive God's message, we can understand the ways in which God is not only inviting us to listen more closely to ourselves, but to listen to the vulnerable voices, the voices on the margins of our society and world, calling for us to live differently. In our JustFaith Ministries programs, all the components that we illustrate for you and outline for you in our materials are there as a help. They aren't the end-all, be-all. Although we have scripted prayers and we offer suggestions for symbols, simple opportunities to connect and to let go, like lighting a candle or holding up a cross, those are just ways to enter into the moment. Those are just ways to let prayer happen to us. When we open a space for prayer, the hope is that as we gather in our groups, we can understand that this is the space where God enters. By lighting a candle and becoming fully present, we not only let God in, but we let in the world. We recognize that we come together to expand our own understanding of who God is and who we are meant to be in the world. So as you prepare for your JustFaith Ministries program, I invite you to consider all the ways that the people with whom you'll gather will serve as an extension of the Spirit. Not only will you receive messages from them, not only will you offer messages to them, but in the space between, in the silence you share, in the sacred space you create, something greater unfolds. So when you arrive after a busy day at work or at home to prepare your space for your first meeting, oftentimes that can be an opportunity to not only remind yourself of how you can be, but to create a very intentional space for how the group can be together. Not only is it important to make sure that we have all the tasks checked off the list and all the supplies at hand and ready, having the candle and having the symbols, those are all pieces and parts of this process. But what's most important is preparing ourselves. So before your group arrives, we always welcome the space to arrive ahead of them, to make yourself fully available to God by taking several slow, deep breaths, by becoming quiet and offering a silent prayer of gratitude for the gift of this time, to not just settle and slow, but to really receive what God is wanting to offer to you at this time. And most importantly, perhaps, handing over the process to the Spirit reminds us who's really in charge. Although you as facilitator are responsible for navigating and managing all of those little details of a process and program, it's really something more than us that makes this happen. And when we can trust God, when we can let our silence speak, and when we can let the Spirit speak in those moments of silence, we have truly let the process happen. As participants arrive, before prayer even seems to have begun, we can help to create a prayerful space by extending a hospitable welcome to participants, by allowing them to feel like they've been recognized and knowing that they've been truly welcomed into the space. Participants begin to leave their barriers and misgivings behind. When someone feels that they've been authentically welcomed and recognized for who they are, when they've been asked how their day's been and listened to carefully when they share their struggles or celebrations, they can be more fully ready to receive the gift of the process about to happen. And when those moments ahead of the session, seemingly ahead of the session, begin to pave the way for more authentic, open, genuine, and ultimately transformative engagement with one another, that's when prayer really can happen. So moving from that space of welcome, of creating the space together, we often find ourselves in a JustFaith Ministries program gathered in a circle, most often around a central prayer candle. No matter which program we're participating in, no matter where we find ourselves in a process, we can always lean into the gift and the challenge of beginning with silence. So often it's difficult to let the silence happen because we're so eager to fill it. We're so eager to make sure that we're saying the right thing or doing the right thing, to make sure we're looking to the next item on the agenda. But giving yourself permission to just be still and let the Spirit work is the first and perhaps more important task you'll accomplish. One of our staff members, Joe Grant, was a youth minister for several years, and he tells the story that when he used to gather groups in his youth center, when he'd arrive, young people would be milling about, chattering and talking with each other, socializing, and he would simply light a candle in the center of the room and sit down. And at first the young people would say, "Oh, hang on, he's lit a candle. Joe, is it time to start? Should we go ahead and gather?" But in time, all he had to do was come in, light the candle, and have a seat. And without a word, the young people would fall silent. They would recognize what was happening. They would settle themselves into a circle, and they would begin to breathe deeply, and let themselves sink into the moment of prayer. That's why these symbols we begin with may seem arbitrary. But what happens when we light a candle is we're reminded of the invitation offered to us. Every time we light the candle, then, we can remember, this is the chance to let go. This is the chance to let this process happen. So resist the urge to fill it. There's a great gift in that space. So as we begin to let the silence speak, this is what begins to happen. Many of you have experienced this. I have experienced this over and over each time I let myself into this kind of space. Suddenly the worries and woes of the day can kind of settle down. You don't necessarily let go of them, but you hold them in a different way in the circle because you recognize their connection to God and to the other people present to you in that space. You begin to slow down. Even your breathing perhaps begins to slow. And when we slow down, we can really begin to pay better attention. And when we pay better attention, we begin to be more present. Presence is the greatest gift we can offer, not only because it helps us to be receptive to the Spirit's message, but because it helps us to be better in the rest of the session. As we move into difficult discussions and dialogues, as we wrestle with challenging questions, as we examine profound and difficult realities about a suffering world, and wrestle with what our faith calls us to be and do in these times, starting with prayer helps us to contextualize these other elements that actually may feel separate from prayer, but are integral and connected to it. Every JustFaith Ministries program includes scripted prayers that begin and end each session. As I mentioned before, these are offered to help liberate you, not to burden you. It's helpful for many facilitators to have the words to say so that you don't get bogged down by trying to come up with your words in the moment. But for some facilitators, the freedom to spontaneously pray for the group is more freeing. Again, the rituals, symbols, and formal prayers that we offer in our programs are tools that can help us to become more present. Ringing a chime helps us to, again, settle into that space of silence. By making a noise, we can sometimes be more quiet. Holding up a symbol can help us to integrate the images and ideas that we've examined in our readings or on our pilgrimages into the content of a session. Even the simple symbol of a cross with the vertical line between us and the divine and the horizontal line that connects us to one another is a powerful symbol of the kind of transformational love that JustFaith Ministries programs invite us into. Sometimes it's more powerful to simply hold up the symbol, a key, a lock, a cross, a candle, a weft of cloth, an empty bowl. These are symbols, concrete images of what's happening inside of us. Just like some of your favorite or most profound or powerful memories have strong associations with senses, smells and sights and sounds, these kinds of experiences can help us integrate more fully. They connect us more powerfully with life. And if our prayer does that, then we've really said yes to it. When we really let prayer happen to us, and we allow those rituals and symbols and prayers to speak to us at a deeper level, not only are we more connected to the Spirit at present and at hand, but we are present to people who have come long before us, to a rich heritage of seekers and prophets who have tried to explore deeply what it means to be a person of faith in challenging and troubled times. Not only do we allow ourselves to hear God speaking now, but God speaking past and God speaking future. Not only can we make ourselves more fully present to who we are, but who we're meant to be. Although in our programs, every session begins and ends with prayer, the truth is, prayer does not begin and end. We only open and close our space of awareness to God, to the Spirit moving amongst us. When we begin or open our session in prayer, The hope is that everything after simply continues that thread of prayer and intention, that awareness and care. When we move from prayer to dialogue, we continue the prayer. We are still in conversation with God. We are still practicing silence, deep listening, powerful presence. When we move to an activity, although the noise level may shift, hopefully our internal space of openness and receptivity remains expansive. And when we finally shift to the closing prayer, we don't open the space again. In fact, we just remind ourselves that we never left, that this is the space we are always in, that we can always find ourselves, and that this is the space that allows true transformation to happen. Because the ultimate point in our programs is to lead one another to a deep level of communication that truly transcends communication, as Thomas Merton said, and leads us to communion. Communion beyond words, beyond concepts, beyond our ideas of right doing and wrong doing. A unity that creates not only a space where we can be aware of the Spirit moving among us, but where that Spirit is moving us to, what we are meant to be and become. In a JustFaith Ministries program, the hope is that the small community formed in the space of the program and process is a microcosm of what we can be as a church, as a people of faith, as a human race on a planet longing for our love. When we engage a prayerful space, when we allow ourselves to become that container that the prayer facilitates, we've done our true work of letting go and beginning to let God. Thank you all so much for joining us and making yourself present to this process today of exploring prayer. To close us is Joe Grant, our Director of Programs.
So let's now penetrate the present moment. Take a deep plunge with a deep breath. And I want to share with you a prayer that is used in our Engaging Spirituality program and many other places. It's a prayer of the heart that invites us deeper and deeper and deeper in to penetrate the moment. If prayer is a determination to be here and nowhere else, no matter how that here feels or where that here is, then this kind of prayer calls us down into that presence. It's actually simply a repetition of a line from the Psalms, Psalm 46, verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." So I invite you, as you're listening to this, to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the voice and the repetition draw you down and bring you back again. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Be. Be still. Be still and know. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I am God. So wherever there is turbulence or trouble in life, whether it's a mountaintop or a deep valley, whether it's in an airplane or sitting in church, let that call to stillness and silence help penetrate the presence and to bring prayer to life in you. Thank you for sharing in this webinar, and God bless you in your endeavors.